everyone, and welcome to our winter National Head Start Association Grow More Good Garden Program webinar. We're very excited to have you here today. I just want to do, if this is your first time joining us, do a brief introduction to the program. The program is a collaboration between the National Head Start Association, Scott's Miracle-Gro Foundation, and Kids Gardening, with the goal of bringing more gardens to early childhood and Head Start programs across the country. We are doing that by offering garden grants, classroom resources, and also trainings and webinars such as the one we're having today. Our speaker today is Emma Walter, and she is the coordinator of early childhood programs and also preschool teacher at the Chicago Botanic Garden. And I'm so excited to share this. When I got a chance to learn from her this summer, and it really just has inspired my whole attitude about garden story times and just how much impact that they can have through children's literature. So I'm going to turn it over to Emma, and thank you again for joining us.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Emma Walter, like they mentioned, and welcome to Exploring Social Emotional Learning through Nature-Focused Children's Literature. It is a topic that I am very passionate about. I can talk about books for hours and hours and hours, so I will try and get it done in just a little bit of time here today. And so we'll go ahead and let me move along. So this is just our quick little agenda. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about emergent curriculum and social emotional learning, two tenets of my school's philosophy, of my own personal teaching philosophy. And then I will share a slideshow of books that I consider to be high quality books that pair both nature and social emotional learning together very well. They kind of dovetail them very, very nicely. There are a lot of books that do this, and I have a whole list that I will share with you. You'll see all of the titles on here. I'm only going to highlight a couple just for time. And then I have a couple case studies where I will present a sort of a scenario, a classroom scenario, or a scenario that you might experience if you work with kids at all, where you might see kids doing something. And you're kind of wondering, like, what is this behavior and how can I like support that social emotional scaffolding that they're working on, but still meet perhaps those content goals that you're trying to hit, especially if you are in a more science, STEM, nature-focused program. I'll share a couple takeaways and then share just my quick contact information. And then these are just quick objectives. You're gonna explore that connection between emergent seasonal curriculum and emerging social emotional classroom dynamics, look at some classroom books, and then practice applying those things. And you'll just kind of do that yourself. This is just more of a food for thought kind of conversation. So hello, I am Emma. This is me reading to one of my classes. I am still a classroom teacher, so I am the coordinator of early childhood programs here at the Chicago Botanic Garden. I am also the assistant preschool director of the Chicago Botanic Garden Nature Preschool. And I am still a classroom teacher as well. So I teach a mixed age 3 to 5 or 6-year-old class of about 16 children maximum. And we meet 4 afternoons a week. So my class is actually going on right now. I've got some great subs in there right now. My assistant is holding down the fort, but I will be joining them after this presentation. So like I said, I have a lot of experience with teaching nature-based education. I've been a nature educator for over 10 years, worked at the Chicago Botanic Garden for the last 5 years, but I've worked at Lincoln Park Zoo, Peggy Notabart Nature Museum, St. Louis Zoo. So I'm very, very connected to that part of the nature, and it's very near and dear to my heart. I have always been a nature kid. Here I am with my brothers. We are exploring at a outdoor like nature preserve in St. Louis, Missouri, where I grew up. So the nature part has always come very naturally to me. But I also was a very emotional kid. I was a kid that needed a lot of support with my really big feelings. So there's me on my grandmother's porch. I think it's getting late out. It's the middle of summer. I'm tan. I'm wearing no shoes, but I'm also having a moment where I'm feeling some really big feelings. So being able to kind of pair, obviously I love to be outside, being able to pair something that a lot of kids really connect to, that nature part, to what they're feeling emotionally and what they're dealing with socially, I think can be a really powerful tool for us as educators. So if you want to, I know a lot of you are saying hello in the chat. But I'd love to know a little bit about you. As I created this presentation, these are kind of the people that came to mind for me that you might, find this topic and find it really interesting. So you might be a teacher, you might be a museum educator, you might be just a parent, interpreters, people who give content to a lot of different people throughout, museums and zoos and things like that. Nature educators like myself, preschool teachers, nature-based educations, camp people. So really, I think this can benefit a lot of different people to kind of just be thinking about books in a different way. If you read books to kids, or if you even just read children's books for yourself, I think you'll find something that you can use in this way. So to dive in, what is an emergent curriculum? A core piece of an emergent curriculum is that it is child directed. So the children are presenting something to you that they are interested in, and you are responding to that, and you are creating that curriculum based on what they are interested in. Right now, I am in a nature-based setting. A lot of our activities have to do with nature. Right now, we're doing a lot with winter. We're doing tracks because we have snow outside right now. But my class is also really into jokes right now. And so I got a couple of joke books from the library, and we're kind of moving in that direction too. So it's being responsive, like knowing what your kids are bringing to the table and responding to that. So those needs, not just what they're interested in, but also what your class needs. If, this class really, they just need a lot more movement, we're going to do a lot more gross motor with that class than maybe a class that loves to draw. I have done projects in the past where my class has made a class book at the end of the year. That's not right for every class. And so being able to respond to exactly what each class really, I think, is their strength. So I think my class this year, their funniness is one of their really great strengths. So we're going to definitely play into that, I think, a little bit. And then it's developed through observation as teachers, as parents, as people around small children who are working on their development. We are always observing, we are always watching, we are always seeing the trends and the things that are happening. So this curriculum develops very naturally just by being around your kids and observing them. And then it's directly influenced by the environment. And I mean that both in the social environment that they are in a class. So a class of all 3-year-olds is going to look a lot different than a class of mixed age kids because they're just in different places of development. So their environment socially is going to look a little different. You might have a class of all kids that love parallel play if you're beginning of the year with a bunch of 3-year-olds. If you're a class that's mostly 5-year-olds, you're going to have a lot more dramatic play, a lot more cooperative play, probably a lot more complex, conflict and things like that, just because of the social environment. And then also the physical environment. So if you are in the classroom, if you are outside, that environment is also going to impact that. For us in our emergent curriculum, that is the seasons. Since we are outside, we try to spend at least 50% of our time outside, although today it's 15 degrees. I think we're not at 50% today, but we do strive for 50% of our time outside. And that physical environment really guides our lessons as well. So we're doing a lot of tracks, animal tracks, footprints in the snow this week. Next week, if we get any sun, I'm hoping to do some shadows. So we're kind of building on what's happening seasonally, and it's influencing the curriculum that we're creating. And then it's always evolving. I have been a teacher here at this school for 5 years, and we have some mainstay projects that we always love to do, but every year for me has looked different. There are projects that I have done once and I may never revisit with a class just because that's not where they're at and they're interested in other things. Or I may revisit them because I'm like, you know what? That was a really fun one. I really loved it. And this class seems like they'd also connect with that. So it's always changing, always evolving, which keeps it really interesting. So it's a lot of fun. And then on the other side of emergent curriculum is also those emergent social emotional learning skills that they're working on. So we know that all learning domains are intertwined, so nothing is happening in a vacuum. If they are working on their gross motor, they are also working on like that risk assessment and that kind of like trusting themselves, working on that social emotional piece of it. If they are working on science, they're working on building that curiosity, that engagement in the world around them. So nothing is happening on its own. They're all kind of working together as they're building their foundations. But also in order to learn and be successful in a learning environment, those social emotional needs must be met. We all know that if we are feeling frustrated, it is a lot harder to like take in what other people around us are even saying. So Working on those social emotional skills and building those building blocks is really important for them to be in those academic settings. And then we also know that building social emotional skills in preschool leads to long-term academic success. These are really foundational skills that they're working on. They're working on those communication skills. They're working on being able to advocate for themselves. They're working on figuring out what they like and what they don't like, especially in friendships, and finding those friendships that feel really authentic and good. And those are things that they'll carry with them. So when we can help really build a strong foundation from the start, when they start in our programs, when they're young, we just see more and more success as they continue through their school years. But we also know that different students have different needs. Some kids might need even more social emotional support than a kid who just comes in and feels like they're ready to go. Maybe they're more comfortable in the space. Some kids might need a little bit more time to warm up. So understanding that not every kid is going to start at the same level, and that you can be really responsive to each child and their specific social emotional skills that are emerging, since no one's going to be in the same place. And then now we're gonna talk about some books, my favorite part. And so when we're thinking about fall, we think about a lot of different topics. If you want to throw any ideas in the chat of topics that you love to discuss in the fall, I'll show a couple that I really love to talk about. I think you'll probably identify with some of them as well that you teach about. But for me, when I think about fall, the big ones that come to mind for me, leaves. Yeah, I see colors. Absolutely. Colors is one for sure. I always do color mixing with the red and the yellow. Sometimes we do leaf paintings, we do leaf man, all those great things. Great projects. Those leaves changing. Oh yeah, the pumpkin volcano. I've got some pumpkin books in there for sure. I've got, I see apples in there. Yep, we have apples, squirrels, and then also a lot of schools kind of focus on that gratitude piece at this time as well. It's something that we really talk about all year round, but I do feel like definitely, it kind of connects with the harvest for us here at the garden. That kind of, being grateful for what the earth has provided for us. So when we're talking about those fall topics, those nature fall topics, these are 4 leaf books that I think do it really, really well. One that I'll highlight on here is Sweep. I think that book is really great. It's about a child who has a very, very grumpy attitude, and it starts really small and it just kind of sweeps through an entire town. So it's talking about how our emotions can impact those around us. It's talking about, how to emotionally regulate, working on calm down techniques. That social awareness of how our interactions impact others, and then also building those relationship skills. Here are 2 other topics. So those pumpkins, pumpkin feelings and cutest pumpkin in the patch are a little similar, but pumpkin feelings I find to be a really good one for younger kids because it shows a lot of different emotions and identifying those emotions, but it's on the faces of jack-o'-lanterns. And then Those Darn Squirrels is probably one of my class's favorite books this year. It's very silly. The refrain is "those darn squirrels," and so we use that kind of, if our blocks fall, we're like, "Oh, those darn blocks." It's just a very cute and silly book, but it's about this old man who only loves the birds, doesn't like the squirrels, and gets really upset when the squirrels, who also need to eat, come to his bird feeders, especially after all of the birds have flown south for the winter. And it's kind of identifying those emotions, recognizing, oh, I'm pretty upset right now, being open-minded to new friendships, and being open-minded to others that maybe you at first were not open-minded to. Taking the perspective of others. The squirrels realize, like, oh, he's probably missing the birds. Maybe we should try and help rather than just try and get the food from him. Kind of extending an olive branch, apologies, forgiveness, and then building empathy of recognizing how others might feel. And then some gratitude books. The one I'll highlight on here, talking about apples. I think Apple Cake, A Gratitude is a very sweet book. And it's very simple words, but it's all about that empathy for those around you, and that gratitude for every step of the process, and then also building relationship skills, especially family relationships, which I think is a very sweet kind of, they're all building and working together. And then moving into winter if you have any topics that you love to talk about in winter, I know I've got my topics. I know we're doing a lot of my favorite topics right now. I saw a couple in the chat as people were kind of thinking, looking ahead to kind of that interim between fall and winter. So yeah, I see snowflakes, hibernation. Yep, lots of snow. Tracks, having a lot of fun with tracks right now. Gear, absolutely. The clothing, the things that we wear in the winter, all good things. Yeah, so snow, definitely one that I think of. Kind of giving. We talk a lot about like caring for those around us in this season. Um, Animals and plants in winter. I saw that one earlier, which is a great one. And plants is definitely one that we focus on a lot around here since we're at a garden. Winter activities, being outside in the cold, absolutely doing all those fun things. So for snow books, 10 Ways to Hear Snow. I love this book. It's a very mindfulness approach to being out in snow and kind of when you take a break and you really listen and you focus in, you can kind of hear all of these differences in how people interact in the snow. It's also about like kind of relationship skills, building relationships with family members, and then independence, doing things on your own. The girl in the story wants to walk all the way to her grandmother's house on her own, and she's feeling really confident. And along her way, she is doing this kind of mindfulness counting to hear different kinds of snow. And it's very, very poignant, very sweet. I really like that story. And so, we do it a lot to kind of like, oh, let's take a break and let's really hear these ways to hear snow. We do a lot of, you can hear your heart and things like that. And this is kind of another connection, another sense that you can really bring that mindfulness piece to build that social emotional skill of regulation. If you're talking about giving, share some kindness, bring some light is one I really love. We always make winter luminaries to signify the winter solstice. And so the winter solstice is when the day is as short as it is going to be all year, and the night just stretches on and on and on. It's the longest night of the year. And so we make luminaries that we send home for them to light the darkest night of the year. And so this story kind of hints at that, but it's about celebrating differences and, being open-minded, not judging a book by its cover, being inclusive of others, and getting to know somebody before we make any split decisions on who they are, and then empathy, recognizing how other people feel. And then animals and plants in winter. I'll highlight Always Everly. I think this is a really sweet book about an evergreen tree who stays green, and all the trees around her start green as well, but then they start changing colors. And she's like, oh, I really want to, I want to be a part of that group. And it's really about celebrating who you are, expressing just who you are, and recognizing that we're all different and celebrating those differences between us. For winter activities, Pip and Posy, The Snowy Day is a story that is a new one to me for this winter season. I found it over the summer, and it very quickly has become one of my class's favorite stories. I think I've read that book to like one specific child probably 6 or 7 times because the story, they just connected with it so much. And what I love about that story is it is about friendship and it's about sharing. And it's about conflict resolution, and it's about kind of compromise, working together. But it also, within the conflict, it shows them like actually getting physical and hurting each other, like pushing each other down, throwing a snowball at each other, which I think is very powerful because that happens with young children. And seeing how they repair that relationship and how they're able to come back from that and really have this moment of like, this isn't working for us. Let's take a break. Let's try something different so that we can both be happy with what we're doing. I love that story. It is one that my classes really love this year. I still have it in my class, and I don't know when I'm going to return it to the library, but I don't think I'm ready yet. And then if we're going into spring and summer, this one is kind of that catch-all because I know for me, we use a lot of books that don't really fit into any one category. You could use it whenever you really want. A lot of nature exploration books. So that's one that I have a really big section of nature exploration books. But what are some topics that you really kind of discuss in the spring, in those warmer weathers, especially, thinking of plants. We do a lot of flowers, things like that. Things that grow, things that live in the pond. Yeah, habitats. Mud, absolutely. Yeah, bees, different insects. Yeah, absolutely. So insects for sure is a big one that we do. Oh, I see somebody's jumping ahead, sees a book that I'm going to be talking about later. Birds is another big one for spring. A lot of our classes will learn about birds, but going along with that emergent curriculum, we'll learn a lot of different things about birds, but maybe some classes will be more interested in learning about eggs, while others might be more interested in learning about nests. And so it really just depends on what our class is showing us they're really interested in. Gardening, planting, we do that a lot of throughout the year, but it's really a lot of these topics come up, especially at the beginning of the year for us, kind of that September range, and then May for sure. Nature exploration, rainy weather, that mud. Yep. So for insects, I really like the story Kaya and the Bees. I think for a lot of children, bees can feel really scary. And somebody who teaches in an outdoor space, bees are everywhere. And we even have like observation hives that we can look at. And some kids love to look at them and they're just like absolutely so ready for it. But some kids are a little bit more nervous for that. And what I like about Kaya and the Bees is that it shows her being really brave, of being like, I'm gonna go, it's going to be great and I can do this, even though she's feeling nervous. But she ends up getting stung. And that really kind of it makes her just tell her, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this. And she really respects her own boundaries and she really sets her own boundaries for herself of, no, I'm not ready. Her dad asks if she wants to try again. And she's like, no, I'm not ready yet. And he respects that boundary. So I think it's a great lesson of, yes, we can be brave, but also, yes, sometimes things are scary and you can take that time if you still need it. But then persevering. She does try again at the end. So really kind of respecting your own pace, I think is really important. For birds, I really like the story. Um, it's hard to choose sometimes. I'm looking at all of them, like, which one do I want to talk about? The story, A House for Every Bird. So this is about a little girl who is drawing pictures of birds and she's putting every bird that she draws, she's drawing a green bird and the green bird goes in the greenhouse. And she draws a blue bird and the blue bird goes in the blue house. And then the birds, her drawings, all start moving into other houses. And they are saying, um, you know, that house actually wasn't right for me. And the little girl's getting very upset because she's like, no, you need to go in this one specific place. And when she really starts actually listening to what the birds need, they're all much happier. She's much happier because her birds are actually having a good time. But it's about thinking of the perspective of others and compromising maybe what your vision was for what somebody else's vision might have been. For gardening and planting, the story "If You Plant a Seed" is really a very beautiful story. Not many words in it, which I think is great because it allows for a lot of conversation, which is really when I think the social emotional piece comes out, is those little extra bits that we can add to make a story more intentional. If You Plant a Seed is about, when two people work together, we're working on a garden, we can grow a really nice garden. But if we sow these seeds of conflict, then our garden can be ruined. And then kind of working through how can we repair from there. And also when more of us work together, we can build an even better garden than what we had before because we have more people who are on our team who are helping us. So it's that kindness, that sharing, but also that conflict resolution. How do we come back from upsets and how do we help one another? For spring and summer, and nature exploration. These are just some of my favorite books ever. I love the story The Collectors. It's about two little girls who go on a hike and they're going to try and find this one last item to complete their collection. And they go really, really far and they go they swim really far, really deep, and they're going all the way across this big adventure trying to find the perfect item, but nothing's quite right. And they end up getting back to their clubhouse, their little collection clubhouse, and they didn't find anything. And so it's managing that disappointment. It's kind of processing that failure. They're saying, oh, you know what, actually, even though we didn't find anything, you did draw a picture of a rare bird feather, and that was really cool. And even though, we didn't find anything, we went further than we ever have before, and kind of celebrating those wins rather than focusing on that failure. And then having that positive mindset to really kind of change the script a little bit, as well as caring for our friends and telling them what we appreciate about them. And then for our last nature exploration page, 10 Beautiful Things is it's about a young girl who's going to live with her grandmother, and they are driving through they're driving on a very long road trip through sort of back road kind of. They're not in a city, and she's feeling really upset about this change. She's feeling nervous about having to go live with her grandmother, and it talks a lot about how she's feeling impacts her physically, which I think is a really important connection for kids to make, that our emotions can have a whole body sort of effect, but also kind of adapting to that change and kind of seeing if you can change that narrative for yourself, having that positive mindset. And so as they go along, they're counting things that they consider beautiful. Maybe that's the sound of the creek as it's melting that they hear underneath a bridge. Maybe it's this old, worn down barn that, you wouldn't necessarily think it's pretty, but to them it's really beautiful, and really kind of celebrating those little bits that make things feel just a little bit easier. For rainy weather, the story Rain by Linda Ashman is about a little boy. And this is another story that does not have many words, but the words that they do have and the expressions on the faces, I think, really tell a great story. So this little kid is like, rain, yes, I love a rainy day, puts on their frog outfit, gets ready to go outside. And on the flip side is an old man who is getting ready to go out into the rain, and he is rain. He is grumpy. He is not happy that it is raining. And so it's kind of this parallel of this kid who's going out and jumping in the puddles, and this old man who's going out and he's like upset that there's puddles and rain, and he's just not happy. And at the end of the story, they meet together at a cafe, and the kid kind of bumps into the old man, and the old man's kind of annoyed, but then the old man actually left his hat behind. And so the little kid brings it to him, kind of tells him, he's kind of pretends to be him. He's like, oh, your hat, And I think that kind of it shifts the old man's perspective, because this little kid put on his hat. So then the old man takes the frog hat and puts it on, and is like, well, now I'm you. And it just that one little change kind of changes what the day looks like for the old man. He goes home and he's like, maybe I'll jump in a puddle. You can see this smile growing. So, that empathy for others, because if the little boy had kind of responded and said, oh, I'm not giving him his hat, I'm mad at him. He kind of grumped at me and I didn't like that. So he's going to have to leave his hat behind. I don't even care. Instead of realizing, oh, he's probably not having a great day, and I bet leaving his hat behind would make him even more upset. So I think I'll help him out. I'll bring it along. So helping others and having that positive mindset, even when it's a situation where maybe you're not always the happiest that it's raining. So now I wanted to jump into just a couple case studies. So these are books that you will probably be familiar with because they are classics. They're classic nature education books that I read every year. I know a lot of people read every year. But I invite you to consider using the book in perhaps a different way, seeing how you can connect that social emotional piece that maybe the kids that are in your lives are showing you they might need, and seeing if you can kind of use books in perhaps a more novel way, a way that maybe you haven't used them before. So before we get started, before I show you, I have kind of a scenario that I've built that has come up in my classes before, or that I felt was sort of showcased a dynamic between some students. And then I will show you our guiding questions to kind of prepare us for that. And then I will give you a little bit of time to kind of puzzle through them yourselves, how you might connect some social emotional aspects to those books through that scenario. And then I'll kind of walk you through what goes on in my head as I think about a book before I bring it to my class. So first, you kind of want to consider, what do my children need socially or emotionally? That's what's happening between friendships. Is everybody coming in and transitioning, and are they ready to go? Or is somebody a little bit more hesitant? What are those little pieces that I'm still seeing with my kids? What is happening seasonally in nature? So that's kind of where I come from for my lesson planning, because I am in a nature based setting. But that could also be something of, what is something that I would like to focus on during this part of the school year? And then how can I connect what's happening seasonally to what's happening in my classroom? Kind of bridging that gap between the two. And I do just want to point out that for these first two questions, those things are interchangeable. So when I build my lesson plans, sometimes I'm coming at it of, oh my gosh, my class this week, we need support in this. My class really needs, we're trying to work on our being able to really listen during circle time, and how can we support that, and what do I need to sort of bridge for my students so that we are able to sit and we're able to kind of work on those skills to have that circle time. And then so maybe the seasonal stuff will come in after that. So I'll say, okay, we're gonna start from this social piece that we're working on, and then outside it might be snowing that week, so maybe we can have some activities, and maybe we're working on teamwork in the class, so maybe we can do some teamwork outside in nature. But then other times, if it were to snow the night before and then we hadn't had snow yet, I was going to say, you know what, we're coming at it. We are going sledding. That is the first thing we're doing today, is we're going sledding. And then I'm going to kind of think about what my kids might need socially and emotionally. So I consider both, but sometimes one thing might really stick out as where I start as I'm choosing what stories I might want to read to my class. So the first case study that we're going to do, and this one, you can, if you have thoughts, you are welcome to throw them in the chat, kind of thinking through this scenario. If you have thoughts of how you might read The Very Hungry Caterpillar and what you might discuss with your students while reading it to kind of address what is happening in your classroom at a different time. So during snack and lunchtime, your class often prioritizes talking, being silly with their friends over eating their food, something that is happening a lot in my class right now, so I might need to pull this book out. But after meals, your students often complain of still being hungry. Their emotional responses are heightened when conflict arises. So that's those are some social things happening. They're talking with their friends, and then they're also still trying to figure out their own emotional regulation. And then here's a book that you may not choose generally to address those topics. So if you have any ideas of how you might connect those two, you can just kind of be thinking about that. You're welcome to throw it in the chat, and then I'll kind of walk you through how I sort of build as I'm choosing my stories to read each day. Something I really, when I think about what's happening, really, like, I kind of try to break it down into parts. So what's happening here is that we're seeing a lot of great silliness. Being silly is a great way to build social relationships with your peers. And so that's the first thing that I see is they're being silly. Can I lean into that? And so can we have fun with our snack? Maybe we have a snack where we make ants on a log. And that's kind of satisfying that silliness, while also making sure that we're still fueling our bodies. And so what we're really seeing with this, especially at the end, that social emotional, that emotional regulation that they're really still working on, and how that pairs, is that we're seeing that they're not really cluing in to what their body is telling them. So when we listen to what our bodies are telling us emotionally, that's when we're able to move our clip on a feelings chart, and we're able to say, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling happy, because we're able to connect our emotions to how we're feeling, and we're able to share that. But when we listen to what our bodies are telling us physically, we can see and also address the connection between how we are feeling and what we can do to care for ourselves, because self-care is a really big part of social emotional growth and development, is being able to care for our needs. And so, like the very hungry caterpillar listens. Originally, they're eating all of that food that just doesn't make them feel the best. And then they finally do eat that leaf that just really really helps them feel like they're ready to continue on, to move forward. So just like the very hungry caterpillar, when we're able to really listen to our bodies and cue into what our body is telling us, we can help, it can regulate our emotions better. So it can be very hard to manage our frustration when we just don't feel our best. And so when we really work to cultivate that mind-body awareness through social emotional learning for our kids. It can help us figure out what feels good for our brains and good for our bodies. And so not just when it comes to sort of understanding, we need to eat our snack because that helps us, feel ready for the rest of our day, but it also helps us through all of our learning experiences too. So, my class during circle time, we have focus tools that really help us move our hands so that our hands are busy, but our brains are working. Our brains are ready to learn. So a book like this, I would maybe lean into the silliness a little bit, and I would read the story and be like, oh my gosh, these are such silly snacks. I wonder if we can be silly with our snack and really sort of engage them in that way. But I also might say, oh, when he ate all those foods that weren't great for him, his tummy really hurt. And I know that if I don't eat enough snack, it's really hard for me to focus for the next part of my day and really learn. So making that connection for them, helping them build that regulation and that sort of awareness of how the physical impacts their emotional, is how I might work on combining those two things. The next case study is The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats, which, a classic for a snowy day here in Chicago. So you teach a mixed ages class with some students who have been here this is their first year there, and some students that have been in the class for many years. And you notice that many of the younger students are still involved in parallel play, while older students are engaging in complex, more dramatic play. And you notice that these groups tend to stay separate. And when they do mix, those older students are making the play plan and all of the decisions for those younger students. So when I'm thinking about this story, it's a great story to really connect with the snowy day, that nature piece jumps out at you. That's a book that I would definitely read anytime I'm reading it in the snow. But what's really happening here in your class is that there are different ages of students, and they're at different ages or different stages of development. There are students that are leading, and there are students that are following, but it's not being discussed as a group. It's just sort of been decided. We're not having that communication between them to really figure out our contributions and advocate for ourselves. And that students aren't really asking each other to play. We're not really working on those social skills of how to make friends. And so the mix of that social development can be seen in this story with Peter from Peter's perspective. When he looks at the older boys in the story, there are some students who are really ready for that active social play, like the older students who are having the snowball fight. And there are some students that just may not be as ready. And so, you can always say that different people have different ways of playing. And Peter finds a lot of fun ways to explore at the beginning of the book. And some of these observations that he's making could be really great mindfulness experiences that you could use with kids while you're outdoors in winter. But I also think that it's a really great, there's not just one way to play. That's a great, understanding and celebrating differences between people. You can read this story and say, oh, it looks like some kids really enjoy throwing snowballs. How many of you like to throw snowballs? You can say me too if you like to throw snowballs. I saw not everybody raise their hands. My favorite thing to do in the snow is to shovel snow, or I love sledding, or I love using our snow painters outside, or I love catching snowflakes on my tongue, and kind of letting them know that celebrating those differences and being inclusive of all kinds of play, and also advocating for what you like to do in play is really important. But I think you could also use this story if you were trying to help, students ask others to play. If Peter wanted to play with the older boys, what could Peter have said? If the older boys saw Peter watching from the sidelines, how could they have invited him into the game? So you can read the story and really offer these sort of provocations to your students to have them really if Peter wants to play, he could say, can I play too? Or he could pick up a snowball and be like, whose team can I be on? And kind of working through and modeling that language for your students. And then, what if Peter wants to play something different? How can he invite others and say, I'm going to build a fort if anybody wants to help me? And so this is that modeling practice can really come out with this story, which, if you just read the story at face value, you might miss all of those little bits that you can really pull from the story. But we can even take this book a step further, and we can think about when Peter's snowball melts. So if your class has been practicing social play skills, invitations, then there may be times that play experiences don't go the way that they are planning it to go, which happens all the time. They have a vision in their head, and when it doesn't come to life, it can be really frustrating. And so when it's very upsetting when things just don't go how you're expecting. And so even though his snowball didn't stay in his pocket the way he wanted, he bounced back. He woke up with a positive mindset and he's like, you know what? I'm still going to go out and play. And I think when Peter asks his friend across the hall to play with him outside, he's showing something really important. I talked earlier about authentic friendships. It's something that I'm very, I'm always wanting my students to find those friendships that feel really good. And so, day one, Peter sees the older kids playing and he's like, I just, it's not right for me for whatever reason. Instead of the next day just coming back and being like, I'm so sad I can't do the snowball fight because I'm just too little. He's like, I'm actually going to find a friend that does explore the way that I want to explore. He's finding those friendships that feel really good for him and that really are fulfilling for him. So if someone invites us to play, maybe they play too rough, maybe they don't really let us make choices, kind of like in our case study about, the older students deciding everything in a game. If you don't like that, you can just let them know, oh, no, thanks. I'm going to play something else. I'm going to play a different way. So some really great advocacy skills, as well as just sort of celebrating that there's a lot of different ways to play, can be a great way to take this book. I think this book is a treasure trove. You can use it in so many different ways. The third story that I chose was The Mitten. So our case study is, your class often experiences conflict during play. Many students are still working on sharing materials and experiences and taking turns. Students in your class often express their emotions through pushing, hitting, grabbing items from one another. And your class comes to you as the teacher. You are the one that is resolving this conflict for them. They are not doing it themselves. So from this, from this case study, what's really happening here is that conflict isn't being discussed. It's just physical, it's actions, it's reactive. We're not really being proactive in building those conflict resolution skills. And then they're also looking at adults as the fixers rather than knowing that they can handle conflict on their own. If we're looking at state standards, the Illinois state standards, there is a standard about being able to resolve conflict. So, it's a really important skill to build. And so from this study, what we're seeing is that your class is still working on their advocacy skills. Hitting and pushing is a way to communicate, but without letting our friends know what it is that's making us upset, the conflict is just going to continue. Things aren't going to be resolved because if I push you and I didn't really know that I did something wrong, I'm not going to connect the dots that I was pushed because I accidentally took a block you were using. So unless we're able to get across that, oh, I was still using that, or, oh, I don't like when you knock down my blocks, the conflict is just going to continue to go. So we have to let our friends know what it is that we want and what we need during play. And it's that give and take of being able to listen to others. And with the animals in the mitten, they never discuss if they feel like there's more room, but we hear their inner monologues that a lot of them feel really overcrowded and they feel like they have to let others in, even if they don't want to. Where they're hearing, oh my gosh, there's no room. But none of them are actually saying, hey, actually, I think we're at capacity. Like, I don't think any more are going to fit in here. And so they're not really letting others what they're knowing. They're just getting a little bit more and more upset on their own. What could they have said if they needed more? Hey, I need space, or, oh, I'm going to get out because I don't have enough space in here. Advocating for that space. Granted, it makes for a way better book when they all explode out at the end, but your kids can come up with some really great answers of how they could have advocated and said, hey, I don't like this. I need space, or, oh, I'm going to take a break. Because your kids are all working on that. And so I think they'd really be able to inspire the animals in the story to say, hey, there's not enough room for the bear to fit in this book or in this mitten. So yeah, that learning to advocate for needing space is a really important social emotional skill. And so modeling to your students how they can ask for play, have your kids come up with ideas of how they can ask for space and communicate what they don't like. My favorite thing is that when I model these words for kids in lots of different interactions, I often will say kind of consistent things over and over again. And by, at the beginning of the year, I'm the one that is saying it over and over again of, oh, reminder, we give our friends space. And by the end of the year, other kids are like, you need to give them space. Like they are verbatim saying what I usually say, and they're becoming their own little advocates. That's very great. I'll see if we can run through. I've got two more. We'll see if we can get through at least one. So case study 4 is Growing Vegetable Soup by Lois Ellert. So your class has a difficult time waiting patiently for things to happen. Waiting for their turns is very difficult. Your class seeks instant gratification and validation. And when things are too difficult, they ask a teacher to do things for them and may have big emotional reactions to activities that they think are too hard for themselves. Rather than stick with challenges, your students often move from activity to activity quickly, kind of just moving through it rather than sticking with it to really get something and really complete it. So what's happening in this kind of case study is patience and difficulty waiting. It's very hard to wait for things. And then they're also working on building emotional regulation and resiliency. So this story, Growing Vegetable Soup, is all about how good things take time. A plant doesn't grow overnight. Difficult things don't become easy right away for us. A lot of things take practice and care and hard work to accomplish, but that often the things that come from all of that hard work are a lot more satisfying for us than if we barely put any work in it at all. So going to the grocery store, buying vegetables, and making a soup is still going to be really delicious, but oh my goodness, if we grow our own vegetables, imagine how special that soup will feel and how proud we will be of all of the things that we've accomplished. So in this story, I also think it's really great because the narrator is working as a team with their dad to grow their vegetable soup. And the dad isn't doing all of the work, and neither is the narrator. So when things feel hard, we can also express to our students that we're a team, we're working together. I'm not going to solve all of it, and you're not going to solve all of it, but we're a team and we're on the same team and we're working together. I have a lot of students who, since we are outside a lot of the time and we have to wear appropriate gear to be safe outdoors, hats and snow pants and all of those good things. A lot of kids want teachers to put all of their gear on all by themselves. They don't want to do any of it, even though we know that they can do those skills. But often even just reminding them of like, oh, we're a team. So are you going to put on this boot or this boot? Okay, you do that boot. I'll help you with the other. Even just kind of letting them know that we're on the same team can really help them kind of build that resilience and be able to do the skills on their own, which is really, really nice. I'm going to skip our last case study, but I challenge you to, if you'd like, you can do this on your own. This is in the small pond. In your class needing a lot of gross motor, how could you tailor this book to kind of meet some of those social emotional needs if your class is working on regulation and things like that? So feel free in your own time to kind of look that through. And then just a few quick takeaways. So you know your students best, you know your kids best. Consider what's emerging both socially, emotionally, and seasonally as you're building, your ideas for lessons and the books that you want to use and how you'd like to tailor them to be intentional. And when you start looking at, books through this lens, through this social emotional lens, I think you might be surprised that almost any book can address social emotional topics. I know for me, when I was pulling books for this presentation, it was very hard for me to remind myself, like, no, this is not actually a book that I would call a social emotional nature book. It's a nature book, but I am assigning the social emotional aspect to it because that is the lens that I look through a lot of books at, is how can I support my kids in their social emotional learning. So I think once you kind of like really start thinking about books in a different kind of way, your world's going to open up. You can use books for a lot of different reasons. And then I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I feel very honored to be presenting here for the Head Start. So thank you for taking the time to spend the afternoon with me. My email address is at the bottom. So if you're interested in connecting, please reach out. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Emma, so much for this great presentation. We have a ton of questions. I hope
Okay.
that I know that my mind has been open to so many different ways to really get the most out of these books, because it's just the stories that you found in them are just amazing. Um, and I love how you combine the garden and nature so seamlessly into everything, because that is the way that it's meant to be. So let me start out with sharing some of these questions that we've had in the chat, and anyone feel free to go ahead and add any additional questions as we go. And I know the first question that I saw pop up many times is, yes, we will share out a book list, and we will share out the presentation in the follow-up email. So that was probably the most common question to come through. The first question that came through was, are these books good for younger children ages 0 to 3?
I think there's value in having children be exposed to books in whatever format they are, developmentally able to engage with it. There's something so powerful with words on a page and even just the illustrations. Um, I say go for it. I don't think you have to. I think something that the longer you teach, you get more comfortable with. You don't have to read every word on a page. You don't even have to read any of the words on a page, but you can still use a book to engage a student in exactly what they're working on. So meeting the kids where they're at, but I think for sure use the books for any children that you would like to use them for, even if it's just look at all those flowers. Let's smell the flowers. That's mindfulness. You're bringing in some of those social emotional skills, but in a way that might be a little bit more appropriate, even if you're not touching on these more socially complex topics.
Excellent. So next question that came through was, someone asked that you mentioned that you have kids outside 50% of the time, and they were curious about why you that number was your target. And I think that the question was also just, what if everyone could put in the chat like about what percentage of the time they also spend outside. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
have
I'll
it.
just give a quick overview. So our program is a half-day program. So our programs, my class runs for 3 hours each day. And so we shoot for about an hour and a half of outdoor time. And that is just because that is a part of our philosophy. We are licensed to be in an indoor space. We have an indoor space. We are very lucky to have an indoor space. So we are not an entirely outdoor program. And so we are able to kind of flow in and out. But as a staff and as a school philosophy, our philosophy is as much time as we can spend outside safely, we're going to try and take it. And so 50% is just kind of our average. That accounts for maybe a 45-minute station time in one of our outdoor classrooms. Maybe we come inside for a warming break for snack, for story, and then we usually end our day on an adventure. So we would go out for the last 45 minutes. It's been a little bit less than that with the cold, and so we've been doing a little chunk of time outside at the front end, spending more time indoors. And then in the spring and in the fall, that number is, sometimes it's even 100% of the time. We snack outside, we do picnic snacks, things like that. We don't have nap time, so that's not a concern for us, but we just try to be outside as much as possible, I would say.
Well, and you just answered the next question was whether you do naps outside. So you do your days are
Mm,
shorter than that.
No, at this time we are not full-time, full day, and so our program, we do not have nap time.
Okay. So next question was, someone asked, where can I order these books? So I don't know if you have a good nature book recommendation for that.
I don't have a recommendation, but I do recommend a local store in your community. We have a book a bookseller near our garden that we have partnered with because they are the garden is a woman-owned CEO, and so we are they encourage us to support women-owned businesses. And so this is a woman-owned business, and we have a really great relationship. So we can just like contact them and say, hey, can you order these books for us? And they are able to order them in for us. We get a bunch of them, and that's great. The library is one of your best resources. You don't have to go out and buy all of these books. I don't. A lot of these stories, I would say mm, probably 50% of these books I got from the library. So definitely utilize your local library if you want to own any of these stories. Definitely look for a local in your community kind of bookstore would be my suggestion.
So the next question, well, let me ask the jump one because it's related. So are these all books available in hardcover? Do you know that? You may or may not know.
Not all of them are available in hardcover, but the majority are. That is my, I agree, that is my personal preference. So most of them are, but I do know like Fletcher and the Falling Leaves, I know that I was only able to find in like a soft cover book. So not all of them, but majority are, yes.
Excellent. So we have two more quick questions. Let's try to squeeze in real quick because we just have a few minutes remaining. So do you offer this as a training for teachers? Do you have related to the literature?
I do not currently offer it as a training, but I am reach out. I'm always happy to talk about books. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have if there's anything that you'd like, let me know.
All right. Excellent. So this last question, I think this will be the last one we have time for. I work in an urban setting, and the playground we use as part of the community. There's barely any natural landscapes for the children to see and observe. What can I do to explore nature with the children?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard thing when you feel like there's not nature around you. One of the books that I put on there, Jaden's Impossible Garden, it's a really great one about a young boy who is building a garden in his apartment complex, and his mom keeps saying, "There's no nature, there's no nature. Like, come inside. Like, what are you doing?" But he feels really like strongly connected to, no, this is nature. So I think whatever you can do to find those pockets, maybe that's dirt, and you lean into mud and you want to bring mud play and you bring you can bring dirt into the classroom and you can mix it and you can even bring pots and pans outside and you can do mud kitchens even if you just have a little bit of mud. Maybe you want to do some planting in the class. Grass grows really quick. You can get a lot of grass seed, grow them in little pots, make little grass people. There's a bunch of things that you can do that are a smaller scale but might feel a little bit more accessible if you feel like there's nothing directly outside. Going outside on cloud breaks, laying on the ground and looking up at the sky. Seeing trees if there are trees around with bare branches, finding letters, V's, A's, all of those things in the tree branches. Just going for, you know, finding rocks. Rocks is a great one to talk about. You can do pet rocks. You can do, there's a lot of great, like, what to do if you find a rock kind of books. What can you do with a stick? So really kind of leaning into those things that don't feel maybe the most, "Oh, I'm not at a garden and what am I supposed to do? I don't have access to like a nature space," but there's going to be probably some sticks around. There's probably going to be some dirt around, and kind of getting creative about what you can do with those things.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's just an amazing presentation, Emma. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let me just end with a few announcements at the end. Following up, we will have a spring garden story time, which will be coming up on Thursday, March 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we'll have a link to registering. It's in the chat, or it will also be in the follow-up email. Our next garden webinar will be on Thursday, March 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And the topic for the spring one is Growing Resilient Children, the Garden as a Non-Judgmental Teacher. So there will be a link to register for that also. And I'll just mention it again because it's the most popular question. We will share out the book list and the presentation. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, either to Emma, or you can also reach out to gardens@nhsa.org, and we will make sure to get that question to whoever is the right person to answer it for you. So thank you again, and great to see you guys. And everyone, go out to. I know I want to go out and get some books. I'm sure lots of you do too. So and start reading, getting ready for spring.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.